Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We are in the third segment of the live show where we are going to I'm going to give a quick recap of some of the games that went down and some of the matchups that were really fun to watch. I tuned into some of these games. As I said before, I tuned into the Lakers game. I already talked about that, so I'll go ahead and I'll talk about some of the rest of the games and what direction I feel like these teams are going in and how well they could perform with the remainder of the season that we have after All-Star break, etc. And before I actually get into the Pacers game, which is the game that I wanted to talk about, I'm going to bring attention to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they've won 17 out of their 18 games that they've played. Out of the last 18 games they've played, they've won 17 games. This is absolutely phenomenal. And while we're on the subject of LeBron, this is arguably the best Cavs team I have seen since LeBron. This is the first time in literal decades that the Cavs have looked like a contender without their king to guide them. And honestly, it speaks about LeBron's legacy as well as speaking about just how bad Cleveland has been without him. And the fact that they've been able to do this with the lineup that they have, and with Darius Garland being out for a considerable amount of games due to injury, is astonishing, in my opinion. And with Garland being back in the lineup, I feel like they're only going to get better. Garland is a seriously underrated point guard in this league. He was an all-star for 1 year. I feel like if he wasn't injured, he'd be an all-star again. But again, super underrated, probably because he plays on the Cavs. The Cavs as a whole, actually, they're a very, very underrated team. But before I get into that, I want to bring up Donovan Mitchell, how he finished the game scoring all the points that he possibly could. I'm going to pull up the box scores real quick, actually, to get the exact points that he scored. Just give me 1 second as I go ahead and I look at the box scores. If my Wi-Fi will be generous to me, it is not being generous to me. That is always fantastic. You love to see it. All right, but yeah, Donovan Mitchell, he reminds me of a young Kobe. And I don't say that because of the recent Kobe statue. I've always said that since he was a rookie. And the reason why I say this is because he won the dunk contest as a rookie, similar to Kobe Bryant winning the dunk contest as a rookie. All right, the box finally. So Donovan Mitchell ended the game with 27 points. So obviously very impressive from Donovan Mitchell. Again, reminds me of a young Kobe. But in these playoffs, in his experience in the postseason and how he plays in the postseason and how he seems to elevate his game when the pressure is on, is astonishing from Donovan Mitchell. And he did it, and he's been doing it since he was a rookie. I mean, he's one of the league's best playoff performers, in my opinion. Obviously, in the bubble in 2020, he blew a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets. But even, with that in mind, he was still out there performing in so many of these games, going toe-to-toe against Jamal Murray, scoring 50 points in several of these games, in those playoff games. And the Nets ended up being the victims to the Cavs and their winning streak. And obviously, the Nets aren't going anywhere. I said this game was going to be a blowout, and I was absolutely correct. The final score was 118-95. The Nets really didn't play well. They were missing Spencer Dinwiddie, so not a player in the rotation, and we had to put Ben Simmons in the starting lineup, and you all know how I feel about Ben Simmons. Please get him off the Brooklyn Nets. Please. He doesn't do anything for the Brooklyn Nets. And I have the Cavs making it all the way to the second round, depending on, obviously depending on matchups. If they face the Knicks in the second round, though, I think that's when their playoff run is going to end. I personally think the Knicks are a much better team. But speaking of being underrated, I'd mentioned the Cavs are being underrated. Somehow, I'm looking at this right now, their odds of winning the championship are below the Lakers. They have worse odds to win the championship than the Lakers. How? They're the second team in the Eastern Conference. How is a play-in team getting much better odds to win the championship than the second seed in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I understand. I never doubt LeBron, but the rest of the Lakers team as a whole is not better than that Cavs team as a whole. Like, that is insane. And they're also below the 76ers. Like, how are they below the 76ers? The 76ers just lost Embiid. And the 76ers have never been able to make it past the second round with Embiid. And they have more odds to win the championship than the Cavs? Are you serious? Like, that is honest. It's honestly, it's criminal. It is criminally, like, they're criminally underrated. And I'm actually, like, I'm amazed at the fact that the Lakers are ranked higher than them. It's insane. And, like, how do they have more odds? Like, I digress. Like, that's just insane to me. But we were talking about the Knicks. The Knicks recently played against the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic put on a show in Madison Square Garden, scoring 39, 11, and 8. He had 11 boards. And the players always try to bring their best game in Madison Square Garden. And Luka definitely brought his best game in Madison Square Garden. And that's sort of the challenge of being a Knick. There's a lot of pressure when it comes to being a New York Knick, with the media constantly being on you and these players constantly performing at such a high rate, because all of these players, they bring their A game when they go into Madison Square Garden. And with that in mind, I think that's going to be the difference maker when they match up against Cleveland. Cleveland doesn't have that high of a media market. As I said earlier, they are ranked so low in championship odds. They're criminally underrated, so not much attention is being paid to them. Therefore, not much pressure is being put on the Cavs. The Knicks, all the pressure is being put on them day in and day out. Every single home game, they have to feel the pressure of the fact that, oh, this great player is going to come in and absolutely destroy us because he is bringing his best game to the Garden, given how many tourists always go to Madison Square Garden and watch the New York Knicks. So with that in mind, the Knicks will be used to that kind of pressure coming into the playoffs. And I feel like that will give them an edge when going against every other team, because away crowds, they probably won't even be affected by them because, like, again, they're able to handle the pressure. And I mentioned earlier, OG recently, like, he went through surgery to remove his loose bone fragment. Again, like I mentioned before, it was the best move that he could have done. He's out for at least 3 weeks, and he tried resting this, but the procedure, again, was the best route. So he'll be fine after the All-Star break. He'll be back in the rotation. He'll be fine. The timing could not have been any better to fix this. So, and I should also mention Dante DiVincenzo scored 36 points in this last game. The Knicks got blown out, but they were lacking Jalen Brunson's production. So with that in mind, if Jalen Brunson was on that squad producing offensively like he normally does, and Julius Randle, and even OG Anunoby for his defense, I think the Knicks come on top when playing against the Dallas Mavericks. It's just nothing was stopping Luka Doncic in this game. Absolutely nothing. So the biggest concern is trying to stay afloat right now before they get too far down in the seedings. But other than that, nothing to worry about from the Knicks. They aren't at full strength. Nothing to worry about whatsoever. And I'm going to pay attention to the Pistons for just a quick second, because they now have won 8 wins and are on a 2-game win streak. And the only reason why I brought this up is because 2 and 8, symbolic of Kobe Bryant. They won the game on Mamba Day, rest in peace. So really nothing else to bring up about this game. Both of the teams, the Pistons and the Portland Trail Blazers, are not doing anything in the postseason. They're not going anywhere. They're fighting for draft picks. So really, I'm not going to touch on this game whatsoever. I'm going to touch on Golden State going against the Pacers, however. The final score was 131-109 in favor of Golden State. So I said the defense needed to come big against Golden State, and they definitely came big against the Pacers, and they definitely came in big. They held the Pacers to 18 points in the third quarter. that is some great defense coming from going against a team that's ranked number 1 offensively and plays with one of the fastest pacings in the game. Like, no Clay also in this lineup, but that was no problem. Steph Curry ended the game with 42 points. 42 points and was 6 of 6 in the first quarter. Like, when Curry gets going this early, that is a serious problem, and that is a very difficult task to be able to catch up, because Curry is a very good front runner. Whenever he's up, he can make that lead turn from 5 to 13 with the amount of threes that he shoots. He can make that lead as big as he wants to if he's going. So the fact that he was getting going in the first quarter was absolutely terrible defense coming in from the Pacers. And again, I keep saying this all the time. The Pacers need defense. They absolutely need that defense, because otherwise teams like Golden State are going to abuse that. Like, Curry was getting open looks in this game. Why on earth were they leaving Steph Curry wide open? That is a death sentence. That is the worst possible defense you could ever play on someone like Steph Curry. You have to be glued to that man. Literally glued. Flex tape that man 24/7. And we're running out of time for this segment, but I'm going to go over this other game with the Bucks. They end up losing to the Timberwolves, and the Bucks lose again. So far they have only one win with Doc Rivers. Yeah, just one. This is really bad for the Bucks. And a lot of people were saying they don't got to worry that much. They still have All-Star break. I think the panic button needs to be pressed right now. Getting Doc Rivers in the middle of the season and replacing your head coach is one of the dumbest moves I've ever seen from the Bucks. It was such a bad move. Like, it makes no sense, because they were winning a lot of games with the previous head coach that they have, and now they brought in Doc, and Doc has to quickly adjust, get all these players in the right spots, get all the rotations down. And we all know how Doc is when it comes to the postseason. He's a choker. Like, his teams end up losing in the games that matter most. So, with that in mind, the fact that they're struggling early is a serious problem. It is a serious problem. But before I run out of time, I also want to mention the Phoenix Suns game. They matched up against the Utah Jazz. Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal both ended the game with 30+. Grayson Allen also ended the game with 14 assists. And I wanted to bring this up because there was no Devin Booker in this lineup, and they were able to beat this team. Now, obviously, the team, they've gotten worse since the trade deadline, so I don't really think that, again, might not be much of an accomplishment, but it shows that they are definitely playing a lot better as a team. Grayson Allen ending with 14 points is astonishing. I had no idea he was that good of a playmaker, but then again, that's one of the best assets that this Phoenix Suns team has. They have multiple offensive stars coming in from off the bench and multiple options to fall back on. So it's not the same story as the Pacers where obviously the Phoenix Suns, they do need defense in my opinion, because what if everyone isn't having a good night on the offensive side of the floor? But the fact that they have all of these other weapons that they can fall back on alleviates a lot of pressure from Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, who can operate and make looks for others. It's a different story than with the Pacers, who have to rely on, don't necessarily have to rely on Halliburton's playmaking, but they do rely on it heavily. And with that in mind, having a lot more options, again, alleviates pressure. So we are out of time for this, for the third segment, so we are going to go into the fourth segment, where I go ahead and I talk about some of the matchups of the week, in my personal opinion, some of the best games that we could have watched, so stay tuned after this short break.